it was a series of bad choices, the best of which was my choice to speak. And that's what got me started as a speaker in the industry. And the rest of it was the classic road trip shit show. And he leans over the table and he looks at me and he goes, do links actually matter? And I'm like looking at this guy and I'm like, it's been a roller coaster ever since. And it's been extraordinary since that moment.
Hello and welcome to SEO Pioneers. Today I'm speaking to Duane Forrester, who started out for working promotions at Caesar's Palace in the mid-90s before moving online. Duane worked for Sports Direct and then in the mid-thousands went on to work for Microsoft. In 2011, Duane helped to launch Bing Webmaster tools, and then in 2014 was awarded the Search Personality of the Year. Duane has been a well-known person in the industry for 20 years, and today Duane is my SEO pioneer. So hello, Duane, and it's very nice to have you here, and I'm very much looking forward to our chat. So I'm going to kick off by going right back to the very beginning. And so you were working in promotions at Caesar's Palace in the mid-90s and then moved into working online. So how did that progression, was that working online for Caesar's Palace, or how did that progression happen, moving into online for you?
While I was at Caesar's Palace, I was in charge of promotions, which included some online stuff in the very early days, mostly just emailing lists and things like that. Making updates to the localized website for the casino that I was at, because this is a physical location part of my career. And I was also the MC and host for any events that were happening for high rollers. So I decided to leave Caesar's Palace and go find work somewhere else. And that's when I bumped into online gambling. I did not know much about it. It was very early days. We are literally talking about the first bust of the internet, right? Where everybody was like speculating and all kinds of money was coming in and the whole thing just fell apart. The year after it all fell apart, that's when I stepped in and, was like, okay, I'm going to get involved in this. And I started because the company that I ended up spending, I think, 6 or 7 years with, they were looking for an online marketing manager. And all of their criteria at the time, small town, smallish, 250,000 people, early days, it's not like the area was awash in people with the skill set and experience that you would want. Like today, it's relatively easy to find an online marketing manager, especially if you're open to a remote job. Like it's just not a problem getting the exact skills you want. Then they weren't even unicorns. They were just mythical. Those people didn't exist. So I got the job because I had a background in promotions. They wanted to run promotions. I knew the legalities of it, and off we went. And this is a time when Google has either just launched or not quite launched yet. So nobody was doing SEO. We were all doing pay-per-click, and company like GoTo.com was the big pay-per-click leader. You'd go in, turn on the accounts, put your keyword bids in, everything was a penny. The expensive ones were 3 or 4 cents, and you'd just leave the credit card open over the weekend, and you'd get 100,000 orders over the weekend, and you're like, great, let's do it again next weekend. Let's do it again next weekend, and that was the business model. And then it just kind of grew from there. Background in gambling, land-based gambling led to internet-based gambling, and you hire people to take over certain roles. So I hired somebody to come in and manage all the pay-per-click work. And I was like deep into the community forums, Webmaster forums and Webmaster World and everywhere else. And started to grow this whole idea of like, well, look, maybe we can, impact organic ranking somehow. What does that look like? How do we do that? And that was the beginning of my career in SEO.
So you, again, like pretty much all of the pioneers that I've spoken to, and everybody I think in SEO, all started out with self-learning and exploration.
Oh, no option, right? Like Like, I'm not kidding. Like, when you say self-learning, it was, I opened up my GoDaddy account. I bought a half a dozen domains of things that I might be interested in. I taught myself how to program HTML and build websites, went through all of that, whether it was Photoshop, Dreamweaver, all these old programs to build these things, learned about FTP, learned about managing all this stuff, and then started writing content. And you started doing all that. Like the first thing I put up, well, I can't even remember what the topic was. Like, I think it was cars. And the only thing that I knew was if I went to places like Dogpile and all of the old original kind of, we'll call them search engines. They were just like lookup tools. If you went into those and you had changed a bunch of your meta keyword tags and just like repeated the word more than the person who was in the first position, you came up in the first position. And you were like, yeah, I'm winning. And then the question was, what the hell am I winning? Like, I don't know. Well, what does this even mean? And at the time, you're looking at your stats counters. It's not having any effect. Nobody's really using this. There's no volume of traffic here yet. So that was it. It wasn't winning for the sake of winning. I think of it kind of like crypto several years ago. People weren't into crypto because they were thinking, oh, I'm going to make money this year in crypto. They were into crypto because of all of the other implications around it. And maybe someday somebody would figure out how to make money with it, and that's how it started. And then it became a matter of when I actually started doing the work as a part of my job, when we decided, okay, we've got a lot of content. We want to actually do what's called optimization on this. What does that even mean? And you go into the forums, and at the time, and some people may still feel this way, but at the time, most of us were using handles that were not our names because we did not want anybody. There was like a big fear that people from Google were watching the forums. And, I didn't want them to know that I, Duane Forrester, was working on this website. So my handle was Sports Guy. Go figure. I work for a sports betting company. The handle was available. So there I am. And I'm just like asking questions of random people. We had no idea who we were. We were just sharing ideas. Just like, oh, I did this happened. Well, what do you think about this? Oh, that's a great idea. And if I expand on it, what about B, C, and D? And you just kind of go, and then relationships form on people who are, like, you're reasonable when you respond to something. It's thoughtful, it's balanced. You don't tend to get upset when, people take a shot at you or they argue with you or things like that. And then you get invited to be a moderator, and you just kind of like just continue down this path that seems obvious because it's right in front of you and you don't know what else to do. So you just keep following the path. And that was, I think, a lot of us in the early days. The first time we went to a conference, I had a name tag on that said Sports Guy because I'm like, we'll figure out the rest of it, but I only know you and you only know me by my handle. So better that, like, you can recognize, oh, that's Sports Guy, and then I can tell you who I am. And now today, no, today, listen, it's got to be under your name. You got to be doing it out in the open. And if not, I can't take it seriously. And yeah, I think most of the people in our industry feel that way. There's nothing to hide now. We all know what's going on, or at least we should. But it was a very interesting time, very interesting beginning. And I will admit this: had no idea I was at the start of. I think a lot of us, we had no idea that we were at the beginning of the industry that would become the search industry. We all just kind of stumbled into something and was like, oh, this is fascinating. This appeals to my sense of I want to tear it down and build it up again, or my kind of rebel sense, like as soon as I learned how to hack a payphone, I was out there with pull tabs and quarters and like trying to get free phone calls and things like that. And, my parents bought me a TRS-80 from Radio Shack. It was my first computer. I immediately programmed a game called Sub Hunt. And after a week of writing and debugging the code, I promised myself I would never code again. And I am now living my best life of not having to code, but I can just tell systems, this is what I want. And so I'm like, awesome. It took you 30 years, but you finally give me what I need. because I'm a lazy coder.
So when you were younger, you did have an interest in computers. I mean, did you have any background in computers and coding before you came to the online space?
You know, probably the closest would be like random friends who had like maybe a Commodore 64 or an Atari system, like, and it was all about gaming, so like I had this exposure with it. But that was like probably, I was young. I was like 7, 8, 9, something like that. And then when I was 10 years old, my parents bought a business. They bought a motel. And so I have a long history in hospitality. And at around the same time, my uncle called and said to my mom, "Oh, you should get a computer so that I can email you stuff." And not too long after that, we ended up with our first dedicated computer. And that was kind of really what reeled me in, right? It took me right in there. So, I go back to dot matrix printers and, the big floppy disks. And, once I got to university, coming out of high school, it was easy to check the boxes for classes that were like computer science and learning the basics of DOS and these kinds of things at the time. Walking around with a big, thick plastic container full of 5 1/4 floppy disks, one for each different project I was working on. And boy, did I ever feel cutting edge. And then now we're sitting here today, and my phone has 1 TB of memory in it, and it's like a supercomputer. So it was always a fascination for me, but I was more fascinated with what it could do, deliver, or bring than how it worked. Never cared about building computers, understood it, built one once and was like, okay, been there, done that. Never really cared so much about the hardware. Anytime I'm looking for hardware, my starting point is whatever the current top level is, I start there. And in my head, I tell myself that allows me to not go obsolete for a longer period of time, which is, I think, kind of crap. But whatever, I like it. Sounds good to me. So I feel good about my purchase, and off I go. Um, and now, then we transition into a period of time where we're literally extracting from the web with all of this. The ability to search, find stuff, research, everything's at your fingertips. And the logical extension to that, where we're sitting today, like I have projects that I'm working on, and some of the concepts that I have to understand, I only lightly understand, but I don't need to understand them because I can ask ChatGPT and I can give it a well-crafted prompt to tell me what I need to know in the way I need to know it. And it will go and pull all of it together and give it back to me. And I'm like, great. It much more speed to knowledge, if you will, for where we're at today. And so I feel like there's a continuity on that line throughout my life online of actually like I want what the internet has to offer. I'm not really interested in the connectivity, IPv4, IPv5, IPv6, whatever. It's great. Look, I turn my computer on, it's connected, it works. Great. Don't care. Don't want to know about that sausage. I just want to eat the damn thing. So there we are. And we should limit our sausage intake because doctors say that's bad.
So So when you first came to working online, I mean, how did that feel? How was that feeling? What was the space like?
It was really interesting. Like, I remember the first day I came in to work. Uh, Everybody's in their own little cubicles off the ground, but it's an open plan web space. And we had what we called the fishbowl. There was a marketing or a meeting room in the middle, and it was all just windows. Um, it was like, I don't know if egalitarian is the right word. It felt very democratic, the very definition of an open workplace. Um, and everybody was just encouraged to go learn whatever you needed to learn. Like, it was like, if you think it's a good idea, go learn about it. It was also the very early days of like handheld PDAs and things like the compact iPac and the HP Trio and things like that. And so everybody was into this kind of like, oh, our data is moving, and how are we managing data? IT security was starting to become a thing and what we have to do with that. And so we were learning an awful lot. We loved it. Like it was fantastic learning all this stuff. And I remember the first day I went to my boss and said, "Hey, there's a conference and I'd like to go to it. I want to see if I can pitch to speak, because if I'm speaking, I don't have to pay for the ticket." And I thought that that was the best choice I could make because it was cheaper on my company's budget, you know? And little did I know that was a directional choice in my life. And my boss just looked at me and goes, "Yeah, whatever." And I turned around, went in, put my pitch in. I think at the time it was SES. It might have been in New York. And my plan was I would drive to New York from where I was in Eastern Canada, Nova Scotia. It's like I don't know, I don't even know how long it was. It was a full day of driving, 8 to 10 hours at least, probably more. And my wife was going to come with me, and we'd just go and like she would vacation in New York for a couple of days, and I would speak at the conference, and this would save money, and this was awesome. And it was a series of bad choices, the best of which was my choice to speak. And that's what got me started as a speaker in the industry. And the rest of it was the classic road trip shit show. And it was like, if it could go wrong, it went wrong. We got our timing wrong. We got stuck in traffic. We got lost. We didn't know where we were going. We had an argument. Like it was like everything was just straight out of a movie, And then finally you get into the city and you're just like, how do I drive to New York City? It's not like anything I've ever experienced before. Finally just got to the hotel and handed the valet the key and went, "I don't care what it costs. I don't want to see my car for like 3 days, And the guy's like, "We got you." That was it. Like, didn't see the car for 3 days, went to the hotel, but all my time at the conference. And it was extraordinary because for the first time in my life, I felt surrounded by people who spoke my language. I legitimately had chills in every session because these people were giving voice to thoughts that I had not shared with anyone because they wouldn't understand. It wasn't even worth saying out loud because the kind of feedback, the kind of encouragement, the kind of connectivity, direction, thought sharing, it would just never happen because in my company, I was the only one immersed in this world. Nobody else was. So it was kind of a watershed moment, And ever since then, oh man, it's been I think almost 27 years now. It'll be about 26 years now from speaking. Um, every year conferences somewhere, and these are very much these conferences. These are how I keep in touch with friends. This is how we build relationships. I don't really have any friends around me close by, but it doesn't matter because I have you. I have everybody on the internet. If I have questions, I ask them out loud and I get answers the next day within hours. It doesn't matter. And I feel completely connected to the people in this industry.
Can you remember what you spoke about at that first conference?
So it was a basic topic around fundamental SEO. And so, look, there's this trend. It's been happening since day one, and I think it will continue to happen forever in our future. We tend to look at something and say, "Oh, that's foundational. Okay, yeah, got it, understand it," and then we don't do the work, and we go looking for the next shiny object, and like we just keep chasing that, and you kind of fail forward over and over and over again. And a lot of times, what that means is you have businesses that are missing fundamental pieces of the puzzle to be successful in today's world and tomorrow's world. Okay, I'll pick on like structured data as an example. I walked on stage. It was June 2nd of 2011. Announced schema.org and was like, "Y'all should use this." And then we waited and we watched and we wanted to see what the uptake looked like, and it was slow. And if we fast forward to today, we don't just have Googlebot and BingBot. We have crawlers from all of these AI generative systems that are out there gathering information. And look, people can argue whatever side of the coin they want on that. It's good, it's bad, it's, whatever. Fact is, those crawlers are using all of that data that's embedded in a web page to understand the content, to select entities, and to build trust around it to use for whatever the use is. Google's case, it's indexing, ranking. Maybe for a generative AI system, it's power a direct answer, whatever it is. Bottom line, however, is if you don't have structured data deployed today, you're at a disadvantage. And so we see this entire, there are millions of websites out there that are actual businesses who are asking consultants, their own in-house teams, big agencies, why don't I perform well? How do I not move forward? Why are my competitors outranking? And it's because of incremental baseline foundational things that they got wrong a long time ago and stopped paying attention to. And so my topic at that time was exactly that. It was, there are fundamental things you have to get right. And these details matter. Now, how naive were we? Thinking about things like you had 60 characters in the title tag or 80 characters in the title tag, and you better make sure your keywords at the beginning of it, and fashioning that, and then handcrafting our meta descriptions, and then toiling over which meta keywords we should put in. Is this word too many? Is it too broad, not relevant enough? And doing all that stuff by hand on an individual level, page by page. Today we know so much more, and the engines have changed, and the whole world of digital marketing has changed. And if you're paying attention to meta keywords today, you're looking in the wrong direction. And meta descriptions, take your best stab at it. Try not to be too spammy. Chances are good Google's going to rewrite it in. So things have definitely evolved. It was. I feel like at the time we were doing the best with what we knew, and I feel like that's still a lot of that today. I think one challenge that we have, and I may be getting a little ahead of us here, but one challenge we face today is we have a lot of people that are in the industry who lack experience, or are entering the industry who lack experience. Whether by choice or by accident, they don't do the research to fully understand the history of what they're attempting to do. And so they're repeating the same mistakes that have already been asked and answered a dozen times before that. And that hurts businesses. It hurts businesses. And you can see in people's careers, if you track their career in LinkedIn, you can see where they realized it was a problem and they left the company at 9 months, at 1 year. They don't spend a lot of time, but they did 7 companies in 7 years. And that's about the right cycle to come in, tell everybody who doesn't know about the topic what you know about the topic, and then try to get some work done, only to see that it's not working, and you to decide, I have to leave before I get fired. And that cycle repeats itself over and over again in our industry. And I'm sure it's not just our industry. I'm sure there are lots of industries. I just pay attention to ours. And I kind of really want to encourage people, never lose sight of that foundational level. And so from day one, I've been like, this is additive, it's cumulative, it's not iterative. So you have to do all of this to here, not just the recent increment to here. You still have to have done all of this. So, big businesses, large companies, successful companies, they understand this. They have good foundations. They built from that. But it's still a topic. You go to any conference today, you'll still find fundamental trends. And part of that is new people coming in. They have to start somewhere. And let's face it, when I started, I'm not going to put you in the same bucket as me, Shelley, but when a lot of us started all those years ago, there was nothing, literally nothing to teach. Nobody was learning something from a book or a blog, or we probably hadn't invented blogs at that point. There was just nothing. And so it was your experimentation, your documentation, and then you going to a conference. And that first conference, I met Mike Grehan. I met some of these people who at the time I was just I met Danny Sullivan, and I was like, hey, smart guy. He knows what he's talking about, right? And it was all about take photos of those presentations. Like, just make sure you got a copy of that presentation. And then you built your own library of knowledge. Then you took it, you shared, and you got more information from others. And eventually we built a corpus of knowledge that allowed people coming in to have a learning base. I wouldn't say it was easy to find, but it was there, And then, of course, we end up moving on to other things. I don't know, we had Sempo for a while. That had a training program built into it. And now there's a number of options if you want to learn stuff. I just recorded content this week for an event while I was in New York. And it's all about, like, how do you find content that you can trust and, like, actually use and learn from? Because there's so much misinformation. There's so much stuff that's just wrong, I run around inside a large company, and I'm having this conversation right here where people I work with are talking about SGE, and I'm like, you have to start talking about Gemini. Like, you can't talk about this anymore. You got to talk about this. It's moved from that to this. When did that happen? Beginning of December. Used to be that. Now it's this. And they're still thinking SGE is like, oh, cutting edge. And I'm like, oh, it's not cutting edge. It's not far from cutting edge. Cutting edge. Like, that's the front right now. So things move fast and only getting faster.
So just going right back to the beginning again, you're talking about, a lot of experimentation. Can you remember any of the experiments that you were doing back then?
Yeah, most of the experiments were like the size of blocks of text that you were using, the number of characters you were utilizing, whether format played any role in things. We did probably a 6-month-long test of whether keyword-rich URLs made any difference. And the funny thing was, round about the time we were ending our testing, basically split our website into A and B, we were like, okay, like, there's no answer in the data. Like, we don't, like, it's all like both sides are even, And then in the last 2 weeks, when we just stopped caring, we were just going to, like, let the clocks run down. Everything was a cron job and it had a specific end time. I was like, we're not putting more time into this, and we're not certainly going to go rewrite all our URLs. Those last 2 weeks, the keyword-rich URL just skyrocketed, hockey stick, straight up, And we were like, I immediately thought it was instrumentation, right? Like, we dropped data on one version or something, And it wasn't. It was all of a sudden something changed, and keyword-rich URLs were valued. And so we were like, all right, went to the IT guys who were like, program every URL to use this slug from right here and make that the URL and make it unique. If you need to add like a number on it or something, go ahead and do that, and that was it. Overnight, boom, done. Traffic increased, everybody was happy, and that lasted about 8 months, and then the rest of the internet caught up, and hey, look at that, you just set a new level. And so, you very quickly started to realize, like, this isn't a I won scenario. You're not in a foot race, you're in a decathlon, because you can't win the decathlon without winning all 10 events. And that's what search was. It was, we didn't realize it, an unlimited decathlon of events to win. Today, extremely hard, extremely narrow. Winning has a different meaning. But then it was like the purest form of A/B testing you could do. I had an instance where we were running a lot of money through Google AdWords at the time, and Google came to us and said, it's right around the time they were saying you can't do gambling ads, and basically our rep's suggestion was to mirror our entire website and put all the ads one click away from their source. So instead of you click on the ad and you go directly to the advertiser, you would click on the ad, you would hit an interstitial page, and then from there you would click again, go to the advertiser. And this was, at that time, a random rep inside the company telling us that's what we should do. Meanwhile, I'm reading the company's guidelines on mirroring websites and saying how you should not do that. You'll get penalized if you do that. And I'm like, what are you going to do? And that was a defining moment where we were like, okay, we have to stop with paid advertising. Like, we have to dial that back because it's getting too tight, but it's also getting extremely expensive. And we were working with companies at the time that had huge budgets, way more than ours. Like, if our marketing budget was $500,000 for the year, their marketing budget was $7 million. Like, we were not even in the same ballpark. So those companies, those gambling companies, would show up as competing ads, and we were like, this doesn't make sense. Like you want us to drive qualified traffic to you, and you're putting up ads trying to get less qualified traffic that's driving my cost of advertising higher. And it was a bit cannibalistic. People just didn't understand it, and there was a lot of that type of like foundational stuff that it's funny. I look back on it now with these memories coming back, and I'm thinking, wow, that's set up so many things for me that are just the norm today as we enjoy. But back then it was all fresh, new, exploratory. Nobody had answers. You were like doing things and asking for forgiveness, not permission, because, well, who the hell would you ask permission of? Like, you didn't know who was in charge until somebody came along and said stop, and you're like, oh wait, you're in charge? Okay, I have a question for you. And like, that was the way. Not surprising. We had all kinds of things that we did back then that became black hat, and I get it, right? Like, Google was still learning its way forward, still trying to protect itself from spamming, and we weren't helping at that time. So we were seeking any advantage, and spamming was just seen as, oh yeah, no, cloaking, sure, let's do that. That seems reasonable. And then it was all about building relationships and trust. I spent a quarter of my time, and this is going to mark my age when I say this, Shelley, so bear with me, okay? I spent about a quarter of my time, maybe 20% of my time, on the phone trying to do digital marketing work. Off we go. Negotiate the rate over the phone, get the contract, sign it, fax it back, like all of that. And that was how that was all done then. And it was cumbersome and took a while. It was, even for the time, it was cheap advertising. Like, nothing was very expensive. You were running on CPM costs that might have been 50 cents, $1, and you'd buy 10,000 CPM run. And so your ad would run for 2.5 weeks. And that ad was massively successful for us. Like, that ad brought in, we ran it for, I think, about 3 months in a row, maybe 3 weeks at a time, with a week break in between. And that ad probably brought in about $2 million in revenue. And it was like, you could do that kind of thing then. And it was very straightforward, but it was kind of kludgy, cumbersome. That was a project, and I had to manage it. Like, today, if I wanted to spin up an ad somewhere, I'd just be like, hey, AI, make this ad. Done. Okay, upload here. Does that pass inspection? Yep, great. Here's my credit card. Run. And that's like minutes, and you're off and running. So it was intense going through this stuff. But that was the time when all of those relationships were still very much direct connections, phone numbers, things like that. It was so much analog as digital grew up. Today I have full relationships on Slack, and I never meet people, and they're totally fulfilling and productive.
When you went to Sports Direct, was that much of a change going to work for that company?
So a lot of what I've been describing is that time at Sports Direct, right?
Right. Okay.
And for me, it was a change because it was the change from offline to online. It was also been a Wild West. We'd already had the internet bubble, and that had gone. So there was a lot of caution, but in that caution was a lot of opportunity. People still knew there was value out there. They were just being cautious about overvaluing. And so it meant that you could cover a lot of ground quickly if you were willing to move on ideas. There was a lot of fast iteration. There was a lot of break it, rebuild it. There was a lot of build it, tear it down, replace it, all of which happened very quickly. There was opportunities for things like we found ourselves very quickly in a place where a lot of our advertisers also wanted our digital marketing knowledge. So by this time, I had somebody running email marketing, I had somebody running the affiliate program, I had somebody running pay-per-click, and I was leading SEO. And so our advertisers wanted all of that knowledge applied to their websites and programs. So we ended up starting a separate company called Seven Dead Pets. And Seven Dead Pets was named that because it ran on 7 servers in one cluster, and each server was named after somebody's pet that they'd had when they were a child. So 7 Dead Pets. And it was a digital marketing agency for online gambling companies. And it only ran for a few years because all those companies had people who went out and learned a bunch of stuff on their own, and they were like, well, we'll cut out the middleman, we'll do it ourselves. And that was it. That's the growth of the industry. But it was interesting to understand how to run an agency, and like how you had to structure work, and how you didn't necessarily do a full hour of work, but the client was billed for the full hour of work because your staff were actually working with 2 clients in the same hour doing parallel work for them. So it was actually an hour and 15 minutes of their time to get it all done, but you got 2 clients done, and each client was billed an hour of time. And so it's very profitable from that side of things. But once your clients know how to do it themselves, they don't need you anymore. And so since then, we've seen this kind of like roller coaster up and down of, companies going in-house, companies, actually buying or renting talent, going with agencies, consultancies, and so on. And it was very interesting to see that at the beginning, and watch what was going on. At the time, I think like Bruce Clay was just getting started, and no idea who he was. Like, I'd never seen or heard his name. And then a couple of years later, I meet Bruce, and we've known each other ever since. So it was the beginning of a lot, for sure. And my time at Sports Direct was pure learning. Every single thing, every idea we had, somebody would have an idea in the middle of the night. The next morning, we'd have a meeting, we talk about it, we go. It was the very definition of scrappy startup and that mentality. You didn't leave a meeting without a list of to-do items like that. There was nobody was hiding. Everybody had a long list of things they were working on. They showed up, they grabbed a coffee, they got to working on something, they cracked some jokes, they kept going. At the end of the day, 3 or 4 things that you checked off the to-do list, and you're moving on. And it was very vibrant. I have to say, it was incredible.
So how did you, so was it 2007 you went to Microsoft?
Yes. That was a surprise. I had just come back from a vacation in Europe, and I had an email sitting in my inbox saying this guy was a recruiter from Microsoft and he wanted to talk. And I thought it was spam. And so I ignored it. A couple of days later, I get another one, and I replied back, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure that you're actually a recruiter from Microsoft. So if you're real, here's my phone number, give me a call. And I'm fully expecting this to just be some spam crap, whatever. I'm in my car in the parking lot at our new building for Sports Direct, getting ready to walk in the building. My phone rings, and it's this guy, and he says, "Hey, Duane, it's Jubal from Microsoft. How are you?" And I'm like, "Huh, okay. Well, that matches what you said in your email." We start talking. I asked him a bunch of questions. Turns out he is legitimately a recruiter from Microsoft, and they wanted somebody to come and work with their SEO program for MSN. And they came across the book that I had just written, and they wanted to talk to me. So we set up the phone calls, we did all of that, and then I ended up taking like a long weekend, and they flew me out to Seattle, did a day of intensive interviews. I remember at the end of that day, I called my wife and said, if every day here is like this, I don't know if I want to work for this company, because this is insane. And turns out not every day was like that. A lot of them were close, but that was a bit insane because it was, I had like 7 interviews in 8 hours. with 7 different people. And in between those, there were 15-minute blocks where I was meeting with other people who were not interviews, but were connected with the team. So it inevitably ended up working with whatever candidate they hired. And at the end of the day, I ended up with a guy who was referred to as the as app manager. And his job as the appropriate manager was to make the decision to hire me or not hire me. And I didn't I didn't know that's how the process went. I just thought this was yet another random interview. When I sat down and started talking with the guy, he was very not interested. He had no knowledge of the space. He didn't know anything about what the work was. And I was like, this is weird. And he said, look, he goes, I'm just going to level with you. He goes, I'm not the ASAP manager. The ASAP manager is traveling right now. He wasn't able to make this. So he gave me all his notes. And he wants me to go through everybody else's notes. And look, everybody else has signed off and said we should hire you. So he goes, screw it. He goes, I'm saying we should hire you too. I like you. So we're done. What do you want to talk about? And I was like completely like stunned because this guy completely buried the lead. Like he's recommending that the company hires me. And that's not the important part of this conversation in his mind. The important part of this conversation in his mind is getting to know me, even though he's got nothing to do with the work I'm doing. And so it was very like a record scratch moment. The next day, I was playing tourist, and I was up on the Space Needle in Seattle, and I got a call from the recruiter. And, he's like, congratulations, you obviously know we're going to move forward with this. They made their offer, and it's been a roller coaster ever since. And it's been extraordinary since that moment. I remember standing on the Space Needle looking around. Basically, I'd heard everything in the offer. I'd done some negotiating. He was going to go away, talk to the hiring manager. I was going to go and talk with my wife, and we'd come back, in a couple of days, make some decisions. And I was staring out across Puget Sound, looking around the Seattle area, thinking, this could be my future. And I just shrugged because I didn't know. We weren't done. Nothing was signed, and sure enough, within 2 weeks, everything was signed and it was up and running. And the crazy part, I got hired. I was hired through the Canadian arm of Microsoft because it was coming on the holidays in Canada for like the end of the year. Everybody in Canada had basically booked the last week or the last 2 weeks of December off, which meant all of my paperwork went in and sat, and they didn't tell anyone in the US. So the team that I was working with in the US thought things were moving forward. I knew nothing was moving forward. We all went away for Christmas break, basically. And on like January 3rd or 4th, a delivery guy shows up with this big box. I open it up. It's a computer, it's a monitor, it's all of this stuff from Microsoft Canada to get my home office set up, including passwords and logins and everything. Just plug this into your internet and follow the cheat sheet, and you're off to the races. I called up my recruiter and I'm like, hey, do you have something to tell me? Because I've been waiting for 2 weeks to get the final signed notice that I'm an employee. And according to the paperwork in this computer box, I've been on payroll the last 2 weeks. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah. So like, I've just been sitting around the house, like watching TV over the holidays. And it turns out I've been on payroll this whole time. And he just sighed and he laughed and he goes, yeah, that'll happen. And that was it. Like, it was just like, welcome to Microsoft. So it was entertaining. I'll say it that way.
What were you working on at MSN?
So the first thing was I was part of the SEO team there, and our focus, my specific focus, responsibility was SEO for the US and Americas. So if it was anything to do with MSN, any of the sub properties, that was on me. Within about 2 years, it ballooned out dramatically. We had a team that was global, so we had people in APAC, in EMEA. The team was very distributed but connected. And when other groups inside Microsoft found out about our team, they started requesting time with us. So before long, we were consulting with like Word and like the productivity group, and we were consulting with all of these different groups internally to help them up level their knowledge. We were obviously pawing around desperately trying to make connections at MSN Search at the time, because you can imagine a group of SEOs inside the company and there's a search engine there. We want to know these people, and that took a few months, but we made the right connections and we ended up with a whole bunch of like internal training sessions where the lead people on the algorithms would come in and teach us how they worked and explain to us how they worked. And of course, we were all sitting there like, we're SEOs. Like, 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 we didn't want to break the spell, basically. We were like, if you're going to share, we're going to learn, but like, I don't want to remind you like what I do for a living. And at the end of it, we all kind of laughed. And I don't remember who it was, but we asked one of the guys, like, we're SEOs, right? And they said, yes, we understand that. And maybe this will help you help our properties in search in Google. Now that you understand these things, because a lot of what we do, Google does the same thing or a version of it. So that's important. And I'm like, are you worried about us gaming our own search engine? And they said, nope, there's not enough traffic there for us to be worried about that. And if you did it, it would be so obvious that somebody would probably lose a job. So we think that this is self-policing. Like you're basically on the same employment contract we all are. So like be smart about it. And it was never like we all laughed about it, and it was just never an issue. And then not long after that, I ended up taking a role. I was unofficially representing the search engine for Microsoft because I was speaking at conferences all the time. So I was the guy who everybody came to for questions about that. I was generally more forthcoming than the folks from Google. So people wanted to have the conversation with me because they couldn't get an answer from them, but maybe they could get a sort of answer that would be applicable from us. And I was happy to engage them. The company, Microsoft, was happy to have me out there engaging and supporting people. It wasn't the same way at Google. It was a very different approach from their side. And so I took over officially. The main reason I was there was to build and launch Bing Webmaster tools. Along the way, I kind of partnered up with the team that launched schema.org, and I spent time with the spam team. I spent time with the maps team, with all the different teams, getting to know them and understand what they're working on and why things matter. It really crafted an understanding that the world and the game of search, if you will, or SEO, is extremely nuanced on the search engine side. There are no big things. Like the possibility of you hitting a target that tips you over to be ranking number one is like almost non-existent. The possibility of you accruing enough small things that tips the balance in your favor and you're seen as being the best, that's quite a bit more possible. But it also takes a lot of work on the website side. And so it kind of opened up my eyes to this, like, it's cumulative, it's not iterative. Your results today are as a result of all of the work you put in prior to this. And that could be applicable to a brand new website that shows up in RankSwell, like, because you can just get it right out of the box now and not have to struggle as much. Or you can struggle a bunch and not get it quite right. And then you're kind of digging out of a hole. And so all of that time inside, the search engine was extraordinary, being able to actually learn from people who were doing it. I remember I had a meeting with a search engineer and I was asking them to build tools. This is before I took over Bing Webmaster tools. And they said, what tools do you think SEOs want? And I was like, we want a link report. Like, we want to know all the links that you know of that are pointed at our website. Ideally, you break it out on a URL by URL level for us. So you crawl the URLs, know what we have for URLs. So you would show me that in one file. And then next to that, you would allow me to see all of the inbound links to that. And then we would love to be able to tell you that we don't endorse some of these links because some of them are going to be spam. We never asked for them. They're garbage and we want to protect ourselves. And he leans over the table and he looks at it and he goes, do links actually matter? And I'm like looking at this guy and I'm like, now I don't know if he's trying to mess with my head. And this is like a reverse psychology thing. But he's sincere. Like like it's a genuine shock to him that links matter that much, you know? And I'm just like, what the heck? And that was my first interaction or introduction to compartmentalization and how the search engines, this is what you work on, that's all you work on, you don't know the other pieces. And that was like a shining graphic example of that moment, you know. Now that guy ended up going on and he built what is the modern foundation search in Netflix. So very clearly he's a smart individual, right? Like if he knew that links mattered, then he would have known that links mattered, right? It was kind of amazing. And I still to this day I keep in touch with him. And every now and then I'll ask him, I'll be like, did you really not know that links mattered? And he maintains with a straight face every single time. He had no idea. Like it was a shock to him that anybody would think links were that important, and he could not understand why. You know, and I'm like, well, there's very good reasons why, because they matter. So it's always been fun and entertaining in this industry. There's always something, whether it's scratching your head going that doesn't make sense or just outright hilarious. There's always something going on in our industry.
Just to, I've got to ask you this, to be able to have that insight into how the search engines work, how enlightening was that? I mean, what they told you and what you learned, how different was it to what you perhaps perceived it might have been? How much new stuff did you learn? Was some things a shock?
Right. So, okay. So the shock for me was learning that we as SEOs, as practitioners of this, were pretty much on track, right? Like if the search engine and the algorithm was the true line going north, we were maybe a quarter to a half a degree off the line as an industry of practitioners. We were really, really close. And it was eye-opening when there's a tool inside Bing Webmaster tools that would actually do an SEO audit of your URL. Okay, because I was like, we can't launch these tools without crushing Google in this area. So this is what we're going to build. So we built the tool. We had to do those. We had to get the core search team to sign off on the methodology, on the logic we were using. Why this signal? Why that signal? Here are the rules. Here's the best practice, and here's what here's how close you are to pass fail sort of thing. And we actually ended up putting in, I think it was somewhere around 111 like if this then that type statements of like here's a rule, you should follow this, that. And we handed that all over to the team, and the team took a week and they came back to us and they said, here are the 12 things that matter. Build your tool with these. And that was it. And I was stunned. And so I went through the building, walked down the hall, knocked on the person's door, and I said, okay, raise your left hand if what you're doing is trying to throw us off the scent. You want to be helpful, but we're too close and you want to limit that. Raise your right hand if what you're telling me is really what we need to focus on. And he immediately raised his right hand, right? He goes, yeah, you guys are overthinking it. He goes, just concentrate on this. And the craziest part of that is we had no way to know this. But if you were to look at that today, and then, or that then, and where we are today, there's almost a straight line through things like the core web vitals testing around UX and the behavior of pages and page speed and the total UX, and then the usefulness side of things, the helpful content update that Google has done. Like there's an almost straight line here between what I was told to build a tool around and where we're at now. And so it's easy for me to look back on it and say, wow, we were really close, and as an industry, we're much closer than we think we are. I think the industry gets it, because for me at that time, what it was like is it was like I was wearing a pair of goggles and they were fogged up. I could navigate, I could see things, I could make do, I could anything I needed to accomplish, I could accomplish it. But I walked out of that time frame and the goggles were gone. It was crystal clear. Everything was perfectly in focus. And I understood it. It's also why I don't give a crap about building links, never have. That's been validated for me. It's not something I need to worry about. I'm only ever concerned about the user experience in all of its fashions, from page speed to the quality of the answer for a question. You know, at one point there was a phrase that was query deserves freshness. So if I'm asking about a train accident that happened in my community earlier today, obviously you're not going to talk to me about stuff from last year. You talk to me about stuff from today. But there's also a concept of the complexity of the question, the complexity of the answer should match it. So if I ask you how to tie a tie, you and I both know it's a multi-step process. Your answer should not be put a knot in it. Well, that is factually true. That does not actually answer the question, how to tie a tie. So, you know, when you look at all of these things, you realize, yeah, this is a multi-layered onion, but it's not 10 layers. It's like 1,000 layers. And so everything became instantly for me became a game of incremental, which then immediately took me back to foundational. Because if you haven't got the baseline things taken care of, you're never going to move forward. I mean, it's simply not going to happen. So it's been a very that was very eye-opening for me. And I think along the way, a lot of people came to similar conclusions. Like not having had the experience I had, they still ended up in the same place. And part of that is me sharing, part of that is other people sharing, part of that is experimentation people have done to validate things. Part of it is Google opening up and being more open to sharing information. It's been good. It's been great having Fabrice out there from Bing answering questions directly to people. You know, we have progressed in a major way.
Do you think that SEOs overcomplicate SEO?
Oh, in a major way. But that's not to suggest it's not complicated, right? Like we have to do the technical stuff. But I watch the stuff that happens. John Mueller does the videos where he answers questions from people, and I have to stop myself from putting my fist through my computer monitor because I'm like, why are we still asking that question? Like asked and answered a decade ago. Things don't revert, they move forward. The totality of the knowledge that Google pulls from is cumulative, not iterative. So it knows all of that and the latest. So how would you be thinking Google gives a crap how many characters you have in a meta description tag? Like, it just doesn't matter. What matters is, does that tag provide enough utility for Google to use so that a consumer of the content will find it valuable? Or did you write a description tag that sounds like a sales pitch? Because that's not useful for a consumer. When they're researching how to do something, you pitching them your solution to it, not a match. So I'm like, yeah, we do overcomplicate it and we do overthink it. I talk to people every day and I tell them, focus on your customers. And they're like, oh, we do. We're obsessive about it. And I'm like, and you're still failing? Yeah, we don't understand. And they said, then you're not focused on your customers. I don't know how else to explain it. It's very straightforward. If you build the best experience for your customer related to your product or service, and nobody else is better for customers on this topic than you will rank better, because that is the exact thing that Google is looking for. And the fact that you're not ranking better and that somebody is outranking you, that's a very clear indication you have work to do. So whatever you thought you did, you patted yourself on the back for and you accomplished, not enough. And that's a hard thing for somebody's ego to understand and assimilate. You know, I put my work into it. I did this all year. You know, I promised my boss I would do it. I got it done. I got a bonus. I got a raise. I got a promotion. I got all these other things that are validations and, you know, indications of doing the right thing. And Google shrugs, you know, because they're operating a different time scale, a different perspective than we are. I do a presentation these days where I talk about a survey that I did back in September where I asked basically the industry, like, how many hours a week do you actually put toward doing SEO work? And the average across in-house teams, which average 2.5 people, is 80 hours a week. So you have 2 people working full-time on SEO and a resource that is half a resource applied to it that is doing no work, or however you divide it up, I don't know. But when you contrast that with the experience that's being built by Google, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, TikTok, Microsoft, they're putting tens of thousands of hours a week into building the experiences that consumers are interacting with. And those experiences are changing consumer behavior and expectation. And you're putting 80 hours a week into SEO. We're not just overcomplicating, but we are looking in the wrong direction. Like, SEO doesn't need to be as complicated as a lot of people make it out to be. A lot of the nuance and the difference that you're asking about is so subliminal and it's so small that even if you score 100 on that, you're not going to see a shift in ranking or traffic. Meanwhile, the whole concept of what it means to rank is changing dramatically with SGE, Gemini, ChatGPT, and everything else. Like, what are you doing to make yourself useful in those environments? Because you may end up cracking the nut in SEO only to find out that people just aren't searching that way anymore. Because guess what? The tech companies changed behavior, and it is right in front of us. It's a big deal right now.
Do you think actually SEO is now more about classic marketing than anything else?
I think that, so we have a lot of people who are technical SEOs who do not understand a lot about marketing, but claim to understand it. They feel like technical SEO is the harder discipline, so they know more about that, and therefore the other one's easier, and I know enough about that. And I don't think that's the case at all. Technical SEO and traditional marketing, one is more about coding and user interface, usability, conversion, optimization, content, that kind of stuff. The other is psychology and human psychology. And I'm sorry, but like, there's no crossover between these in our educational systems. There's like, you need to be learned, like self-taught in each one. I talk about this in one of my career tracks where I talk about the T-shaped marketer, where you should have a deep discipline in one area, but then have other disciplines that you know of. And you can't claim to be a marketer because you know SEO. Marketing is a distinct discipline, and you have to dig in on it. Like, you have to discreetly learn it. And as it stands, I think a lot of SEOs need to do more work in learning that side of it. We also have a bit of a problem in that people get put into a box where, oh, you're an SEO, and that's all. And nobody wants to talk to them about anything that's not SEO. And so what happens is you develop marketing programs, marketing campaigns, and then afterwards, when the content is already created, you're putting it up on a website, you go talk to an SEO and say, can you optimize this? Like, it's a thing you do afterwards. And that is a classic failure point, and it will cripple programs every single time. Because the SEO, the first thing they're going to say is, you should have had me in here doing keyword research when you started with content, because I'm telling you a lot of this is misaligned. And then the content people get upset, and then the program manager's upset because now the timeline's in jeopardy, and now the IT department is upset because they have so much more work to do, and there are baseline things that they were told to fix that they never fixed, but now they have to fix. Like, it's all of that. And I think one of the biggest complications isn't that SEOs overcomplicate things. That's more of an individual thing. As a group, we tend to, but it's that companies complicate the path forward themselves. They keep groups silent. They don't encourage them to work together. They think of SEO as a strict tactic, so something you apply afterwards. You build the car and then you paint the car. And the fact of the matter is, SEO needs to be there for all of those things. It's not an ego thing. I'm not saying that because I'm an SEO and I want to be at every table at every meeting. SEOs need to be there because things you're going to do will impact ranking, and they have input on that. So you should have them there. Whether it's one SEO sitting in all the meetings or all of your staff at a baseline level of knowledge around SEO does not matter. The act of optimization starts way earlier than companies realize, and that complicates everything afterwards. If you build a house, the foundation's not good, you will always have problems with the home. The only way to fix it, tear the home down, fix the foundation, build a new home. That's really expensive. Versus if you just thought to build the foundation correctly in the first place, you will never have a problem with the foundation. It's straightforward.
It seems that the keyword here is definitely foundational, and it's something I've been thinking myself, because things are moving so rapidly at the moment with AI, that for me, when things are in such flux, really, we should be going back to the basics and holding on to the basics
100%.
while everything else is changing. That's the one thing that you can hold on to.
It's an anchor. It's a safe haven. Along the way, what will happen is, and people shouldn't be worried about being tied to history, because a lot of people think about that and they're like, well, yeah, but I'm not moving forward because that's all I'm talking about. It's all I'm doing. There's so much more out there. No, you hold on to the basics. Don't worry. The industry is going to suck you forward into whatever's new, but you will take the basics with you and you will apply it in your new area. Like, we're already seeing that application across generative AI. We're a year and a little bit into Gen AI, and SEOs have figured out a lot of stuff. They've figured out a lot of good approaches, a lot of good ideas. Like, we actually know what to do now, how to use tools, how not to use tools, what to be concerned about, new opportunities, all of that. And the foundations of what we're doing around entity management, data management, UX, conversion optimization, every bit of that needs to be accounted for. New interface, doesn't matter. Still got to figure that stuff out.
Well, Duane, we've obviously been talking for quite a while, and there are a lot of things that I didn't get to ask you about that I really wanted to, but I know obviously you have a time issue. So I think at this point, I'm just going to have to say to you, the final question I can throw at you is, what do you really miss about the early days?
So I think the thing I miss about the early days is we had a lot of kind of wide-eyed learning going on, where everything was fresh. Everybody was, hey, this is surprising to do. And we shared an awful lot. It was like every morning you could get up and go into the forum. It was like watching reality TV. You were just addicted to it. What did this person say? What was this idea? I value their opinion. This person's, a dumbass. Like, all of that. And we've kind of grown through all that, right? We have our own versions of it today, but it's much more of a fire. It's just a lot harder. When you pop onto Twitter and find out that there are, 643 new tweets from your network, like, do you really have the time to go through all of those and see what's in there? And it's harder. So I kind of miss that. I miss the newness of all the topics as well. You would go and sit down, and like every session you went in, you were worried about missing something in another session because everything was new and wanted it all. And it's for me and for a lot of people today, that's not it. It's inches, not miles. And so it's nuance. And you just get it in different ways. Like I learned things now by hallway conversations with friends at conferences. And it's because we built the relationships all those years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it is a wonderful industry, and I love it so much. I've made some incredible friends, and it is my life. And I think for a lot of SEOs, I get the same message. I think it is. It's not really just a job, is it? It really is a lifestyle completely. The conferences, they're your friends. It's not networking. It is seeing your friends.
Every year for the holidays, I have a Zoom meeting, and I'm on a Zoom meeting with a bunch of people I know from the industry. We're not talking about industry crap. We're not talking about it. We're talking about family and holidays and traditions and making fun of each other and all of that, because we are all friends and to certain degrees family.
And family.
I'm not aware that that's in any other industry.
Well, on that heartwarming note of family, I'm going to wrap up there because I know you've got to go. I could talk to you for at least another hour or two, Duane, because there's so many more questions I've got, so I might have to talk to you again.
We'll do it again. No problem, Shelley.
But I will say thank you very much for being my SEO pioneer, and it's been wonderful to talk to you, Duane. Thank you.
Thank you.